Jasper Wiese has received a 6-match ban after picking up a red card in his final game for the Leicester Tigers, meaning he's going to miss the Irish series as well as a lot of the games in the Rugby Championship. With Duane Vermeulen retiring and Jasper Wiese now banned, it begs the question, who should play number 8 for the Springboks this year? Before we get into that, please make sure you absolutely murder that subscribe button, leave the video a like and drop your opinions down in the comments. Let's get into this video. So if you didn't see it, this is what Jasper Wiese got a red card for and ultimately a 6-match ban for. Here he comes in, tries to clear him out, and then basically just moves him aside and drops him on his head. Doesn't look great. Here he comes in, tries to clear him out, and then kind of just picks him up and drops him almost on his head, and that's what he got the red card for. Now, while a lot of South African fans are not happy with that decision, and in my personal opinion, it is a little bit of a soft red card, but in the hearing process, why he has got a 6-match suspension is because of his prior record. Having picked up 3 cards already for the Leicester Tigers in the seasons that he's played for them, there was absolutely no mitigation, and the 6-match ban is basically the harshest punishment you can give someone who gets a red card. So although not ideal, it does open the doorway for a lot of other options in that number 8 jersey. And yes, they gave him a 6-match ban, but it could even extend to an 8-match ban because the Wales test is outside of the international window, so that technically doesn't count as a match served. And if he's not needed against Portugal for the Springboks, then that game also doesn't count. So it could go from just missing the Australia test in the Rugby Championship to missing the New Zealand test as well in the Rugby Championship, which take place in September. So definitely not ideal, but let's get into a couple of options, and there's a lot of options that could take over that number 8 jersey from Jasper Wiese. So we're going to start from the most unlikely players to get to the number 8 jersey and then move over into the favorite. So the first player who there's been a lot of chatter about this season is Achiva Daimani. He's had absolutely phenomenal seasons for the Stormers over the past 2 or 3 years. He's quite an agile player. He is physical, but he's not the typical Springbok number 8, which is probably why he hasn't been selected for the alignment camp and probably why he's been sort of looked over by the Springbok selectors over the past 6 months to a year. He can play flank as well, which gives him a little bit more of utility in that Springbok jersey, but I just don't think he's going to have any chance sort of playing for the Springboks. Didn't get added to the alignment camp. He plays for the Stormers, so he probably won't be available for the Wales test. So it's definitely an outside bet, but Achiva Daimani has had a phenomenal season, and he probably does deserve a Springbok cap at some point in his career. The next player that has an outside chance of playing in that number 8 jersey is Joarno Augustus, who has played for the Northampton Saints this season and has been absolutely phenomenal for the Northampton Saints, who have been playing specifically well in the Premiership, but we also saw them make a very deep run in the Champions Cup. He's a big ball carrier. He's only 26. He represented SA under 20, so he's definitely on the radar of the selectors. Obviously, he didn't get added to the lineman camp squad. He's not going to be available for the Wales test because that falls outside of the international window. So although there's an outside chance, he has had a good season. He's just probably not in the conversation at the moment. Then we're going to move into the category on the fringe. Now, there's 3 players for me that are on the fringe that are there and thereabouts, but maybe just need to do a little bit extra. Maybe it's not their time just yet. The first one is Frankie Horn, who plays his rugby for the Lions, and he's a very similar player to Warren Whiteley, who Rassie Erasmus actually selected for the Springboks in his first stint as the Springbok coach. Frankie Horn definitely resembles Warren Whiteley in terms of how he carries the ball, his running game, his work rates, and we've seen Rassie Erasmus back someone like Warren Whiteley to even captain the Springboks. So Frankie Horn is definitely in the conversation. Added to that, he will probably also be available for the Wales test on the 22nd of June, so he could get a shot there with the Bulls and Stormers players probably not being available, players in Europe not being available. A similar choice to Frankie Horn, who will definitely be available for the Wales test, is Pepsi Buthelezi. Now, Pepsi is only 24 years old, but he's been knocking on the Springbok door for many, many years. He's one of those players that can also play flank and 8th man, and he's probably a little bit better suited to play flank, but we have seen him do the job at number 8 for the Sharks. They're playing the Challenge Cup final tonight. I'm very interested to see how that game goes, but I definitely think Pepsi Buthelezi could definitely be an option for the Wales test, and then they might move away from him for the Irish tests and then the Rugby Championship. The last player I have on the fringe is Mupelo Gumede, who has had an absolute breakthrough season for the Bulls after moving from the Sharks to the Bulls, and he's made the alignment camp with the Springboks, which means that he's piqued the interest of Rassie Erasmus and the Springbok selectors. He's also only 23 years old, and we've seen him play at 8, we've seen him play on the flanks. So Mupelo Gumede is definitely one of those players for the future. Unfortunately for him, you have the likes of a Cameron Hanekom in that same team, who I think is looked at as slightly above Gumede at the moment, and it's probably unfortunate that the Bulls are probably going to make it to the semi-final or final of the URC, so he won't be available for that Wales test, and I just don't think they're going to go with him for the Irish test and the Rugby Championship, but maybe he gets a go against Argentina in the Rugby Championship later this year. We then move on to the category called In the Mix. Now there's 3 players I have here that are in the mix, but they're probably not the favorites at the moment. The one, we've mentioned him, Cameron Hanekom, another one who's had an absolutely huge season for the Bulls, a breakthrough season. He's only 22 years old. He has everything that a number 8 for South Africa needs. He can also play on the flank, so he provides a little bit of utility there. And I do think he's been picked as sort of the successor to Duane Vermeulen. He's only 22 years old. If the Springboks can keep him and Gumede for the next sort of 12 years, that's absolutely massive. He's also been added to the alignment camp, so the Springbok selectors definitely have an eye on him, and I would not be surprised to see Cameron Hanekom start against an Australia or New Zealand this year. The other 2 players that I have in the mix are the Du Preez brothers, and while you could probably substitute them out for some of the guys on the fringe, the Du Preez brothers are always on the Springbok radar. They've both picked up caps for Rassie and Jacques Nienaber in a Springbok top. And yes, Dan Du Preez does have an injury at the moment, but that's just meant that Jean-Luc Du Preez can move to play that number 8 role in the Sale Sharks side, which has been doing very, very well at. And I wouldn't be surprised to see either of them get an opportunity in the Rugby Championship or in some test along the line this year. So we've covered the outside bets, we've covered on the fringe players, we've covered in the mix. Now we move over into the favorites. And I definitely think that these 3 guys could be the future for this year for the Springboks in that number 8 position. Now, the first one is obviously Evan Roos. Now, the last time the Springboks played a test match without Duane Vermeulen and Jasper Wiese was back in November of 2022 when the Springboks played against England outside of the international window. Evan Roos played in that test match, and the Springboks ended up beating England 27-13. Now, Evan Roos got his chance in 2022, and then he kind of fell off the boil for a little bit in 2023. A lot of the criticism about him was that he couldn't handle his emotions. He's a little bit red hot at times and therefore makes silly decisions on the rugby field. This season, though, you've seen him sort of take a step back and he hasn't been so red hot, but he's been performing out of his absolute boots at the moment. He's big, he's a massive ball carrier, he's great on defense, and he does sort of embody that Springbok number 8 personality and what a Springbok number 8 is all about. So Evan Roos is definitely going to get a go this season, in my opinion. The next one is someone who made his name at the Rugby World Cup, and that's Kwagga Smith. Now, he is injured at the moment. He picked up a long-term injury back in January, but it is hopeful that he will be back for the Springbok season, and we've seen how good Kwagga Smith was in that 2023 World Cup. He was more of an impact player coming off of the bench, but he can play 8, he can play 6, he can play 7. Kwagga can even play wing. So he's just got that 7s background that makes him a lot different to any other 8. He's agile, he steals so many balls, he's great on defense, he can open up gaps and put people into gaps more importantly. The only thing is that if Kwagga Smith does start for the Springboks, then there will have to be a little bit of a reshuffle on the bench because Kwagga was just so vital on the bench for the Springboks in the World Cup. But he has played number 8 for the Springboks in 2021 against Georgia and the British and Irish Lions. So they definitely see him as a possibility in that number 8 role. And if he comes right, if his injury subsides and he can play against Ireland and in the Rugby Championship, then Kwagga Smith is definitely, his name is definitely right at the top of the list. And then the final player I want to look at, that I look at as one of the favorites, is Ulrich Louw. Now, Ulrich Louw already has 2 Springbok caps. He's only 24 years old. And him, Cameron Hanekom, Mupelo Gumede, all of those guys from the Bulls could be seen as sort of this package deal that moves to the 2027 World Cup. He's been absolutely phenomenal for the Blue Bulls. He can play flank, he can slot in at lock, he provides a great line-out option, he's great on defense, and he's a massive ball carrier. Ulrich Loh has been very impressive this season and could potentially be the Springboks number 8 this year for the Island Test, for the Rugby Championship. It's going to be very exciting to see who Rassie Erasmus and the coaching staff pick for this number 8 role this year, with Jasper Wiese out, Dwayne Vermeulen retiring. But the one thing the Springboks do have is absolutely massive depth in that number 8 role. It's a good problem to have, and I can't see who ends up in that number 8 jersey. As always, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you haven't, absolutely mur that subscribe button, leave this video a like, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy. Peace.